The words cut deeper than any knife could. I sat at the edge of their pristine leather couch, my hands folded tightly in my lap, as my daughter-in-law, Claire, leaned forward, her voice dripping with venom. "You smell like death, Harold," she said, her nose wrinkling as if I were some rotting thing dragged in from the street. My son, Michael, sat beside her, his eyes fixed on the floor, silent. The room felt colder than the November wind rattling the windows of their sleek, suburban home. I was 68, not ancient, but the years had carved their story into my skin wrinkles like rivers on a map, hands rough from decades of labor. I'd built a life, a good one, with my wife, Ellen, God rest her soul, and raised Michael to be a man of principle. Or so I thought. Now, here I was, a widower invited to their home for Thanksgiving, only to be insulted in a way that made my heart ache more than my aging bones. Claire's words weren't just cruel. They were a declaration of war. She'd always been cold, her smiles as thin as the ice on a January pond. But this was different. This was personal. I'd come to their house bearing a homemade pecan pie, Ellen's recipe, hoping to bridge the growing distance between me and my only son. Instead, I was met with disdain, as if my presence were an inconvenience, my existence an offense. I stood, my knees creaking, and looked at Michael. "Son, you got anything to say?" My voice was steady, but inside, I was crumbling. He didn't meet my eyes, just muttered something about not wanting to make a scene. Claire smirked, folding her arms, her manicured nails glinting under the chandelier's light. That smirk, it was a spark to the dry kindling of my pride. I left that night without another word, the pie untouched on their counter. The drive back to my small apartment was a blur, the headlights of oncoming cars streaking like tears across my vision. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Angry at Claire for her cruelty, angry at Michael for his cowardice, and angry at myself for believing family could still mean something in a world obsessed with appearances. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Ellen and I had shared countless meals, laughter, and dreams. The silence was deafening without her. I poured a glass of whiskey, the cheap kind that burns more than it soothes, and let my mind wander. Claire's words echoed, "You smell like death." I wasn't dead yet, but I'd be damned if I'd let her bury me. I wasn't always this frail old man. I'd been a financial advisor for 30 years, sharp as a tack, with a knack for turning modest savings into fortunes. I'd retired with enough to live comfortably, but I'd also set up trusts, investments, and accounts for Michael, ensuring he'd never want for anything. He didn't know the half of it, though. I'd funneled money into his name, how I'd secured his future. But Claire, she knew. She'd seen the statements, the properties, the portfolios. She thought she could push me out, claim it all, and reduce me to a footnote in their perfect life. I leaned back, the whiskey warming my chest, and a plan began to form. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. If Claire thought I was some feeble relic, I'd show her just how alive I could be. I'd built their wealth, brick by brick, and I could dismantle it just as easily. Bankruptcy wasn't just a financial state. It was a lesson, one they'd learn the hard way. The next morning, I woke with purpose. My apartment was modest, but my mind was a vault of knowledge. I pulled out my old laptop, its keys worn from years of use, and logged into the accounts I'd set up for Michael. I wasn't stealing every cent, was still legally mine to control. I'd been too trusting, leaving things in their names, assuming family meant loyalty. That ended now. I started small, transferring funds from their joint savings to a separate account I controlled. Nothing drastic, just enough to make them notice. A few thousand here. A few there. I called my old colleague, Sam, who still worked at the firm. Sam, I said, my voice steady. I need a favor. Pull some strings for me. He didn't ask questions. He knew my tone meant business. Over the next week, I unraveled the financial web I'd spun for them. Stocks sold at a loss. Bonds cashed out early. A rental property quietly listed for sale. I didn't touch their primary residence or Michael's retirement fund yet. This wasn't about destruction. It was about control. Claire wanted to play dirty. I'd show her I could play dirtier. By the time they noticed, I was already 3 steps ahead. Michael called, his voice trembling with panic. Dad, what's going on? Our savings gone. I could hear Claire in the background, her voice shrill, demanding answers. I kept my tone calm, almost gentle. Son, you should talk to your wife about respect. Maybe then we can sort this out. I hung up, my heart pounding. For the first time in years, I felt alive, not the frail old man Claire saw, but Harold Grayson, the man who'd clawed his way up from nothing. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about reminding them that family isn't a one-way street. I sipped my coffee, staring out at the gray dawn, and waited for their next move. The days that followed were a chess game, and I was playing both sides of the board. Claire and Michael didn't call again immediately, which told me they were scrambling, probably arguing, pointing fingers. I imagined Claire's perfectly made-up face twisting in frustration, her manicured nails tapping furiously as she checked their dwindling accounts. Michael, my boy, would be caught in the middle, torn between his wife's demands and the father he'd all but abandoned. I wasn't heartless. Every move I made hurt, like pulling stitches from a wound not yet healed. Michael was my son, my only child, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, to balance a checkbook, to stand up for what's right. But he'd let Claire's words slide, let her treat me like garbage, and that betrayal stung worse than her insult. This wasn't just about teaching Claire a lesson. It was about waking Michael up. I spent hours at my kitchen table, papers spread out, my laptop humming as I shifted more assets. I liquidated a small mutual fund I'd set up for their future $20,000. Gone in a day, redirected to a charity for veterans. It felt fitting. I'd served in the army before Michael was born, and I knew what it meant to fight for something bigger than yourself. Claire wouldn't understand that. She was all about appearances, designer bags, a spotless house, a life curated for social media. I wondered if Michael even saw her for what she was. The phone rang on the 5th day. It was Claire, her voice sharp but unsteady. Harold, what are you doing? You can't just take our money. I let her rant, her words spilling like water from a cracked dam. When she paused, I spoke softly, deliberately. Claire, you said I smelled like death. I'm just making sure your bank account matches your opinion of me. There was a long silence, then a click as she hung up. I smiled, not out of joy, but because I'd rattled her. Michael showed up at my apartment the next evening, unannounced. He looked older than his 35 years. His eyes shadowed, his shoulders slumped. Dad, he said, standing in my doorway. Why are you doing this? I invited him in, poured him a glass of water, and sat him down at the table where his mother used to braid his hair for school. Michael, I said, I gave you everything. A future, security, a legacy, and you let her spit in my face. He flinched, his hands gripping the glass. She didn't mean it, Dad. She was just upset. I raised an eyebrow. Upset. She humiliated me in your home, and you said nothing. That's not upset, son. That's disrespect. He looked away, his jaw tight. and I saw the boy I'd raised wrestling with the man he'd become. I wanted to reach out, to hug him, but I held back. He needed to feel this. I showed him the statements, the accounts I'd drained, the donations I'd made. His eyes widened, panic creeping in. Dad, we're going to lose everything. The house, the cars. Claire's furious. I leaned forward, my voice low. Good. Maybe now you'll both learn what it means to lose something real. I told them I'd stop, but only if they met me halfway. An apology from Claire, face to face, and a promise to treat me like family, not a burden. He left without agreeing, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. I'd planted a seed, and now I had to wait. Meanwhile, I kept moving pieces on the board. I sold a commercial property I'd gifted them, the proceeds going to a scholarship fund in Ellen's name. It wasn't about the money. It was about stripping away their illusion of invincibility. Claire thought she could control everything. Michael, their image, me. I was proving her wrong. The next week, I got a call from Sam. Harold, you sure about this? You're burning bridges. I laughed. A dry, hollow sound. Sam, they burned the bridge when they decided I was disposable. I'm just clearing the rubble. He didn't push further, just sent me the latest account updates. Their savings were down to a fraction, their lifestyle teetering on the edge. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was fleeting. This was about respect, about family, about the values Ellen and I had tried to instill in Michael. I started visiting the local community center, volunteering to teach financial literacy to seniors. It kept me busy, kept my mind sharp. The people there didn't see me as old or useless. They listened, asked questions, laughed at my stories. It reminded me of who I was before Claire's words tried to define me. I wasn't deaf. I was Harold Grayson, and I still had fight in me. 2 weeks later, Claire showed up at my apartment. I hadn't expected her to come alone, but there she was, standing in my doorway, her designer coat out of place against the peeling paint of my building. Her face was a mask of controlled anger, but her eyes betrayed something else: fear. Maybe. Or desperation. Harold, she said. Her voice clipped. We need to talk. I let her in, gesturing to the same chair Michael had sat in. She didn't sit, just stood there, arms crossed, as if touching anything in my home might contaminate her. You've gone too far, she said. You're ruining our lives. I leaned against the counter, my hands steady despite the storm in my chest. Claire, you told me I smelled like death. You think that didn't ruin something? Her lips pressed into a thin line. It was a figure of speech. You're taking it too personally. I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that made her flinch. A figure of speech. You humiliated me in front of my son, in his home. You don't get to decide how I take it. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor, a flicker of uncertainty. She wasn't used to being challenged. I laid out the terms, a genuine apology, not just words to appease me, and a commitment to treat me with respect. Your family, Claire, whether you like it or not. Act like it. And this stops. Keep pushing me, and I'll keep pulling the rug out. She stared at me, her jaw working, but said nothing. She left without agreeing, but I knew I'd shaken her. The ball was in her court now. Michael called later that night, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Dad, Claire's a mess. She didn't mean to hurt you. Can't we just fix this? I sighed, rubbing my temples. Michael, fixing this starts with her. I'm not the one who drew first blood. He promised to talk to her, to make things right. I wanted to believe him, but trust is a fragile thing, and mine was worn thin. I kept up my financial maneuvers, though I slowed the pace. I transferred a small portion of their savings back, just enough to keep them afloat. But I held the rest in limbo. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about leverage. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to understand that actions have consequences. Ellen used to say, "You don't teach a child by shielding them from falls, you let them stumble. Then show them how to stand." That's what I was doing, even if it hurt. At the community center, I found purpose. The seniors I taught were like me, verlooked, underestimated, but hungry to learn. I shared stories of my career, my mistakes, my triumphs. They called me Mr. Grayson, their eyes bright with respect. It was a balm to the wound Claire had inflicted. One woman, Marjorie, a spry 75-year-old, told me I reminded her of her late husband. He never let anyone push him around, she said, grinning. I smiled back, feeling a spark of my old self. Then came the letter. It was slipped under my door, handwritten, no return address. I opened it, expecting a bill or junk mail, but it was from Claire. The words were stiff, formal, but they were there. "I'm sorry for what I said. It was wrong, and I didn't mean to hurt you." No mention of respect, no promise of change, but it was a start. I sat down, the letter in my hands, and felt a mix of relief and skepticism. Was this genuine, or just another move in her game? I called Sam, asked him to pause the transfers. "Give me a week," I said. "Let's see if she means it." He chuckled, his voice warm. "Harold, you're a tougher bastard than I remember." I laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. Maybe I was. But I wasn't doing this for me, Alan. It was for Michael, for the family we used to be, for the hope that we could be again. The week after Claire's letter was a waiting game. I didn't trust her apology. Not yet. Words are cheap, and hers felt like a calculated step, not a change of heart. I kept my guard up, but I also slowed my financial chess moves. I wanted to give Michael a chance to prove he could stand up, to show me the son I'd raised wasn't gone. The accounts stayed frozen, the assets in limbo, but I didn't pull any more strings for now. Michael invited me to dinner at their house, a gesture that felt like an olive branch, brittle but offered. I accepted, not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed to see their faces, to gauge their intentions. When I arrived, the house smelled of roasted chicken and herbs, a stark contrast to the tension that hung in the air. Claire greeted me at the door, her smile tight, her eyes avoiding mine. Michael hugged me, a quick, awkward embrace that felt more like duty than warmth. Dinner was strained. Claire served the meal with precision, her movements practiced, like a hostess in a play. Michael tried to keep the conversation light, talking about his job, the weather, anything but the elephant in the room. I ate slowly, watching them, waiting for the moment the masks would slip. It came when Claire cleared her throat, her voice measured. "Harold, I meant what I wrote. I'm sorry. Can we move past this?" I set my fork down, meeting her gaze. "Claire, an apology isn't a transaction. It's not enough to say the words, you have to mean them. You hurt me, and you hurt Michael by putting him in the middle. If you want to move past this, show me you understand what family means." Michael shifted in his seat, his face pale. Claire's smile faltered, but she nodded, her lips pressed tight. The rest of the meal passed in silence, the clink of silverware louder than any words. I left that night with a heavy heart, unsure if we'd made progress or just danced around the wound. But something had shifted. Claire hadn't pushed back, hadn't lashed out. Maybe she was starting to see the cost of her actions. Or maybe she was biding her time. Either way, I wasn't letting my guard down. Back at my apartment, I dove deeper into my volunteer work. The community center had become a second home, a place where I wasn't defined by Claire's words or Michael's silence. I started a workshop series, teaching not just financial literacy, but life lessons, resilience, respect, the value of standing up for yourself. The seniors ate it up, their stories blending with mine, creating a tapestry of shared struggles and triumphs. Marjorie, my favorite, brought me homemade cookies one day, her eyes twinkling. You're not just teaching us, Harold. You're reminding us we're still here. Her words stayed with me, a reminder of why I was fighting. Not just for revenge, but for my place in the world, for the legacy I wanted to leave. I thought of Ellen, how she'd always believed in second chances, in redemption. Maybe that's what I was offering Michael and Claire, a chance to be better, to rebuild what they'd broken. A few days later, Michael called, his voice different this time, softer, more certain. Dad, I talked to Claire. She's trying. Can we meet again? Just you and me. I agreed, and we met at a diner, the kind of place Ellen and I used to take him for pancakes on Sundays. He looked tired but determined, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in weeks. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. I should have stood up for you. I was scared of losing her, but I see now what I was losing instead. His words hit like a wave, washing away some of the anger I'd carried. I reached across the table, gripping his hand. You're my son, Michael. I'd do anything for you. But you need to choose who you're going to be. He nodded, tears in his eyes. And for the first time, I felt hope. Not for Claire. Not yet. But for him. Michael's apology was a crack in the wall between us. But it didn't erase the months of silence or the sting of Claire's words. I wanted to believe him, to trust that he was ready to stand up. But I'd learned the hard way that trust is earned, not given. I kept the financial accounts on hold, a safety net in case this was another false dawn. But I also started to loosen my grip, transferring small amounts back to their savings. A gesture of good faith. Claire was another story. She hadn't reached out since dinner, and I didn't expect her to. Her apology, if you could call it that, felt like a means to an end, not a genuine reckoning. I wondered what Michael saw in her beauty. Sure, but beneath that, a hardness that chilled me. Ellen had been all warmth, her love a steady flame. Claire's was a flicker, easily snuffed out by pride. I threw myself into the community center, expanding my workshops. The seniors were my people now, their faces lighting up when I walked in. We talked about more than money, grief, aging, the fear of being forgotten. I shared my story, not the details of Claire's insult, but the feeling of being cast aside. They understood, their own stories mirroring mine. Marjorie, ever the firebrand, said, Harold, you're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for all of us who've been told we're done. Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't just Harold Grayson, wronged father. I was a voice for those society overlooked. A reminder that age didn't mean obsolescence. I started writing a booklet, a guide to financial independence for seniors, pouring my expertise and heart into it. It wasn't just about money. It was about dignity, about taking control of your story. Michael visited again, this time at the community center. He watched me teach, his eyes wide with something like awe. After the session, he pulled me aside. Dad, I had no idea you were doing this. It's incredible. I shrugged, but his words warmed me. Just trying to make a difference. Son. He hesitated, then said, Claire's agreed to therapy, couples counseling, and maybe family sessions with you. She's not perfect, but she's trying. I nodded, unsure how to feel. Therapy was a start, but it wasn't a cure. Still, I saw the effort in Michael's eyes. The boy-eyed raised fighting to surface. "I'll think about it," I said. "But she needs to show me, not just tell me." He agreed, and we parted with a hug. Longer this time, like we were stitching something back together. That night, I sat at my table, the booklet draft in front of me. I thought of Ellen, how she'd smile at this, at me finding purpose again. I thought of Claire's words, "You smell like death," and how they'd sparked this fire. I wasn't dead. I was more alive than ever, building something new, not just tearing down. I transferred another chunk of their savings back, a sign I was willing to meet them halfway. But I kept one ace up my sleeve, the largest account, a trust I'd set up for their future children. It was still in my control, and I'd hold it until I was sure. Sure of Claire, sure of Michael, sure of the family we could be. I wasn't doing this out of spite anymore. I was doing it out of love. Tough love. The kind that builds instead of breaks. Months passed, and the air between us began to clear, though not without effort. Michael and Claire started therapy, and I joined them for a few sessions. It was awkward, stilted, like strangers trying to remember how to be family. Claire was guarded, her apologies still tinged with defensiveness. But she showed up. Michael was the bridge, his commitment to rebuilding what we'd lost keeping us tethered. I saw glimpses of the son I'd raised, the one who'd once looked at me like I hung the moon. I published my booklet, Financial Freedom After 60, and it spread like wildfire at the community center. Local libraries picked it up, then a senior organization in the next town. I started getting calls for speaking engagements. My name no longer just Michael's dad, but Harold Grayson, the guy who's helping seniors take back their power. It wasn't about fame. It was about purpose, about proving Claire wrong in the best way possible. One evening, Michael and Claire invited me to their home again. No pretense of a grand dinner this time, just pizza, paper plates, and a quiet conversation. Claire looked different, softer, her eyes less guarded. "Harold," she said, her voice steady. "I was wrong. Not just about what I said, but about how I saw you. I'm trying to be better. It wasn't perfect, but it was real." I nodded, my throat tight. That's all I ever wanted. "Claire." Michael reached for my hand, his grip firm. "Dad, I'm sorry I let you down. I'm here now." I squeezed back, feeling the weight of years lift. Just a little. We talked late into the night. Not about money or insults, but about memories, Ellen's laugh, Michael's childhood, the life we'd built before it fractured. It wasn't fixed. Not entirely. But it was a start. I released the last of their accounts, including the trust. Not because they'd earned it, but because I'd made my point. I didn't need to hold their future hostage anymore. I'd shown them I wasn't invisible, wasn't disposable. The money was theirs again, but the lesson was mine to give. Family isn't about what you have, it's about what you're willing to fight for. I kept teaching, kept writing, kept living. The community center named a scholarship after me. A small thing, but it felt like a legacy. Marjorie, my biggest cheerleader, hugged me at the ceremony, whispering, "You showed him, Harold." I laughed, thinking of Claire's words, now just a distant echo. I didn't smell like death. I smelled like life hard won, fiercely claimed, and shared with anyone who needed it. As I drove home that night, the stars bright above, I thought of Ellen. She'd be proud, not of the fight, but of the healing I'd torn down to build up. Not just for me, but for Michael, for Claire, for the family we were becoming. The road ahead wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I'd walk it with my head high, my heart full, and my spirit unbroken.